There is a moment every gamer knows. You sit down. You tell yourself just one more round. Just one more level. Just 5 more minutes. And then you look up and 3 hours have passed. The room is dark. You miss dinner. Your phone has 17 notifications. And the strangest part is, you do not even feel bad about it. You feel like you want to keep going. That feeling is not an accident. It is not a coincidence. It was engineered. The games that pull you in the deepest, the ones that made you cancel plans, skip sleep, and ignore the world around you, were designed with a level of psychological precision that most people never think about. And today, we are going to pull back the curtain on the most addictive games ever created, why they work, what they do to your brain, and why, even knowing all of this, you will probably still go back and play them tonight. Let us start with something that researchers have been studying for decades. According to a 2019 report by the World Health Organization, gaming disorder was officially classified as a diagnosable condition in the International Classification of Diseases, ICD-11. That classification came after years of evidence showing that certain games create compulsive behavior patterns that mirror what we see in substance dependency. The brain's reward center, the nucleus accumbens, gets flooded with dopamine every time a player earns a reward, levels up, or wins a match. Researchers at Stanford University's Department of Psychiatry, led by Dr. Alan Rice, published findings showing that the brain's reward-generating regions are more strongly activated in male players during video game sessions tied to territory and acquisition mechanics. But this is not just about any one group of players. It is about design. And the designers of the most addictive games in history understood exactly how to keep that dopamine loop running, regardless of who was sitting in the chair. The first game we have to talk about is World of Warcraft. If you grew up in the early 2000s, or even heard stories from people who did, you know that World of Warcraft was not just a game. It was a lifestyle. At its peak in 2008, Blizzard Entertainment reported over 11.5 million active subscribers. People were paying monthly fees just to keep playing. That alone tells you something. But what made World of Warcraft so extraordinarily addictive was a system called variable reward scheduling. This is a concept borrowed directly from behavioral psychology, first described by B.F. Skinner in his research on operant conditioning. The idea is simple. When a reward comes at unpredictable intervals, the behavior that produces it becomes far more compulsive than when rewards arrive on a fixed schedule. World of Warcraft built its entire loot system around this principle. You never knew when a rare item was going to drop. You could run the same dungeon 40 times and get nothing, and then on the 41st run, you get the sword you have been chasing for weeks. That unpredictability is the hook. It is the same mechanism that makes slot machines so hard to walk away from. The National Council on Problem Gambling has drawn direct comparisons between loot-based game mechanics and gambling behavior. And that comparison is grounded in real behavioral science. World of Warcraft also layered in social accountability. Guilds created real obligations. If your raid team was counting on you to show up at 9 on a Tuesday night, you showed up. You did not cancel. Because canceling meant letting down real people you had real relationships with, even if those relationships existed entirely inside a digital world. That social structure turned a game into a community, and leaving a community is psychologically much harder than closing an app. Then came League of Legends. Developed by Riot Games and released in 2009, League of Legends grew into one of the most played games on the planet. By 2022, Riot Games reported over 150 million registered accounts globally, with around 8 million players active every single day. The addiction mechanics in League are layered and relentless. Every match is roughly 30 minutes long, which feels manageable. You tell yourself you have time for one game, but the match ends. And either you won and you want to ride that high into another game, or you lost and you need to redeem yourself. There is no natural stopping point. The design does not give you one. Research published in the journal Cyberpsychology, Behavior, and Social Networking found that competitive online games that tie player identity to rank and performance create particularly strong compulsion loops because they attach self-worth to continued play. In League of Legends, your rank is visible to everyone. It rises and falls based on your wins and losses. That visibility means your ego is constantly on the line every time you queue up. Now here is where you need to stay with me, because what comes next goes even deeper into how these games were specifically engineered to own your time and attention. We are going to talk about Fortnite, Minecraft, and a mobile game that quietly made more money than most Hollywood blockbusters without most of its players realizing what was happening to them. And if you are watching this and you are not yet subscribed to the Inventor realm, take 5 seconds right now and hit that subscribe button, because every single week we go this deep on the systems, the technology, and the psychology shaping the world around you. And you do not want to miss what we have coming. Fortnite launched in 2017 and within a year had over 125 million players. The game was free. That was the first genius move. Removing the financial barrier meant that anyone with a device could get in, but free does not mean without cost. Fortnite made billions through a cosmetic purchase system that had nothing to do with gameplay advantage. And everything to do with social status. Skins, emotes, and gliders did not make you a better player, but they made you visible. They made you stand out. And for teenagers and young adults, visibility and social status inside a game matters enormously. A report by Common Sense Media in 2019 found that a large percentage of children between the ages of 8 and 12 played Fortnite. And a significant number reported that they felt pressure to keep playing in order to stay connected with their friend groups. The social layer was not a side effect, it was a strategy. Fortnite also introduced the Battle Pass, a tiered reward system that gave players a list of goals to complete each season. The season had an end date. If you did not complete enough challenges before the season ended, you missed out on exclusive rewards that would never return. That is a psychological mechanism called loss aversion, and it is one of the most powerful behavioral drivers ever documented. Nobel Prize-winning researcher Daniel Kahneman demonstrated that the pain of losing something is roughly twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining. Fortnite weaponized that asymmetry. The fear of missing out on a skin kept players logging in even when they did not feel like playing. Minecraft is a different kind of addiction, and it is worth understanding why. There is no objective, there is no end screen, there is no leaderboard, and yet, as of 2023, Mohan Studios confirmed that Minecraft had sold over 238 million copies across all platforms, making it the best-selling video game of all time. The reason Minecraft works the way it does has everything to do with what psychologists call the flow state, a concept introduced by Hungarian-American psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi in his landmark research and later detailed in his book Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. Flow is the mental state where you are fully immersed in an activity, where challenge and skill are perfectly balanced, and where time seems to stop existing. Minecraft is almost mathematically designed to keep you in flow. The tasks are always just challenging enough to require your full attention, but never so hard that you feel frustrated. You dig, you build, you explore, you survive. The game expands with you. As your skill increases, the world offers more complexity. There is always one more cave to explore, one more structure to build, one more biome to discover. Children and adults alike fall into Minecraft sessions that last for hours without any awareness of it happening. And gaming behavior researchers have specifically identified open-world sandbox games as uniquely effective at producing extended play sessions because they remove the natural stopping points that more structured games include. Now let us talk about a game that most people do not take seriously, which is exactly why it was able to do what it did. Candy Crush Saga, developed by King and released in 2012, generated over $1.5 billion in revenue in 2014 alone. It was played by over 93 million people daily at its peak. It is a matching puzzle game with bright colors and cheerful sounds that seems completely harmless. And that is the point. The people playing Candy Crush were not teenagers. They were adults on their lunch break. Commuters on the subway, parents waiting at school pickup. Candy Crush reached audiences that traditional games never touched because it asked for nothing up front and delivered small, consistent dopamine hits through quick wins. The levels were short enough to feel completable, but the difficulty curve was tuned with extraordinary precision to keep players engaged without overwhelming them. Behavioral researchers studying mobile gaming patterns have found that the structure of casual games specifically exploits moments of low cognitive engagement, the idle pockets of daily life, and fills them with habitual play that users often do not even consciously register as a decision they are making. They are just playing reflexively without ever choosing to start. The live system in Candy Crush, where you run out of attempts and have to either wait or pay to continue, was one of the most discussed monetization strategies in gaming history, and yet it worked, because by the time you ran out of lives, you were already invested. You were 3 levels from a checkpoint. You had already spent 20 minutes on a single level. Walking away felt like a loss, so players paid. Not because the game was worth paying for in that moment, but because the accumulated investment of time made stopping feel worse than continuing. That is the sunk cost effect in action. And it is one of the oldest and most reliable triggers in human decision-making. Then there is Diablo. The Diablo series, created by Blizzard Entertainment, is perhaps the purest example of variable reward engineering in the history of gaming. The entire gameplay loop is built around killing enemies and collecting loot. Enemies drop items randomly. The items have random stats. The possible combinations are nearly infinite. So every enemy you kill carries the genuine possibility of a perfect item drop, even if that drop almost never actually comes. This is the same neurological trigger that powers gambling. A study published in the peer-reviewed journal PLOS I in 2014, examining loot-based video game mechanics, found that random reinforcement schedules in games like Diablo produced measurable changes in player behavior consistent with compulsive reward seeking. Players were not simply enjoying the game, they were chasing a feeling, and the game was calibrated to deliver just enough to keep them chasing without ever fully satisfying them. Pokémon GO changed the conversation about addictive game design entirely in 2016 by moving the experience into the physical world. Niantic reported over $232 million in revenue in just the first month after launch, and at peak, the game had over 28 million daily active users in the United States alone. Pokémon GO used location-based gameplay to tie the compulsion loop to real physical movement. You had to go outside to play. You had to walk to hatch eggs. You had to visit specific real-world locations to find rare Pokémon. The game turned the entire physical world into a game board, and then attached the emotional stakes of collection and completion to every step you took. The completionist drive, the need to catch every Pokémon and fill the Pokédex, tapped into a psychological need that researchers studying collecting behavior have connected to identity formation and mastery motivation, a deep-seated human desire to achieve comprehensive knowledge or possession of a defined category of things. It is why people collect stamps, baseball cards, vintage records. Pokémon GO simply brought that ancient impulse into the 21st century and made it interactive. What all of these games share, from World of Warcraft to Candy Crush, from Fortnite to Pokémon GO, is not just good design in the traditional sense. It is the deliberate application of behavioral science to entertainment. The designers of these games understood that boredom is a choice that the brain makes, and that the brain can be convinced to choose engagement indefinitely if the engagement is tuned correctly. Variable rewards, social accountability, loss aversion, flow states, identity investment, sunk cost psychology. These are not gaming concepts. They are human psychology concepts that the gaming industry learned to deploy with extraordinary effectiveness. The American Psychological Association published a report in 2020 acknowledging that while most players engage with games without developing disordered behavior, the games that do produce compulsive play share identifiable design features. And those features are intentional. That is the piece that most people miss. It is not that you have weak willpower when you lose 3 hours to a game you meant to spend 20 minutes on. It is that the game was architected by people who spent careers studying how to make exactly that happen. Understanding this does not make the games less fun. It does not mean you should stop playing. But it does mean you should know what is happening when you feel that pull, when you tell yourself one more match and mean it, and then mean it again for matches later. You are experiencing the output of deliberate engineering that has been refined across decades of research and billions of dollars of development. The most addictive games ever created are not addictive because they are exceptional art, though some of them genuinely are. They are addictive because the people who built them understood your brain better than most people understand their own. And they used that understanding to build something you would never want to leave. And that, right there, is the most fascinating and slightly unsettling truth about the games we love. They were made to hold you, and they are very, very good at their job. If this kind of deep dive into the systems and psychology behind the technology shaping our world is what you want more of, then the Inventor realm is exactly the channel you need in your life. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications so you never miss what we put out next, because we are just getting started.